This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Actor Russell Crowe arrested for throwing a telephone.
Winona Ryder was arrested today for shoplifting.
Pop star Michael Jackson admits sharing a bed with a teenage boy.
The shadow is dark, it's secretive, it can be dangerous.
Things we hide, things that we lie about, not only to others but to ourselves.
That dark side of us, each and every one of us tries to hide.
The shadow shows up in so many ways. Drinking too much, writing bad checks, eating cake in the middle of the night after 3 days of dieting, visiting porn sites while our wife makes us dinner. Right now, hundreds of millions of people are living in denial of their individual shadow.
The temptation is to distract ourselves. The temptation is to pretend it's not happening and not do anything.
We don't want to be it. We can be sure it is our shadow.
People who express self-righteous morality are usually the ones who have the darkest, deepest shadows.
We see it in the media all the time. A filmmaker making deep Christian films shouts anti-Semitic comments in a drunken rage. Corporations begging for bailouts are caught paying their executives multi-million-dollar bonuses. The Catholic Church, which preaches righteous sexual morality, hides pedophiles in its clergy.
This is a subject we never talked about.
The cost of ignoring a destructive pattern is that you're going to self-destruct.
Like locking somebody in the basement who wants to get out.
They find mischievous ways to express themselves.
If you haven't cleaned your house, you're going to be in trouble.
This is why we want to deal with the shadow. It's not just to love the good, it's to love the dark as well.
Is dark,
my old friend.
secretive.
They were talking about the shadow.
You can't fight darkness with darkness, but you can switch on the light.
Are you ready to be strong where you were weak before?
Step out of the smallness of your darkest thought into the brilliance of your biggest dream. If shadows could talk, they would tell us there is gold to be mined in every experience.
Joining me now is the young lady behind the shadow, Debbie Ford. And Debbie, welcome to the X-Zone.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Debbie, what was your inspiration for creating the shadow effect?
My inspiration was I've been teaching for the last 15 years. I've written 7 books, 4 of them on the shadow. And, you know, to really get people to see it visually, to get them to understand the language. You know, every day people are self-sabotaging. There's 18 million people in the United States on antidepressants and more that want to be, you know. So, you know, I teach emotional education. You know, how do we make peace with these dark impulses? What do we do with these self-destructive behaviors? What can we do besides trying to deny it and suppress it, which, you know, in the long run, most of us know it doesn't work.
Does everyone suffer the shadow effect?
Yes, everybody's got their shadow somewhere. I mean, it's part of our human nature. And that's kind of the lie, I think, the myth that we have to bust through right now. Everybody's got this dark side. Most people know it comes when you don't have the radio on, or you don't have the TV on, or you're not listening to music, or you're not drinking, and you're just kind of quiet with yourself. You hear the ongoing internal dialogue that's filled with worry or self-doubt or fear or grandiosity. You know, it shows up in many forms. Some people, it shows up in the way that they treat their bodies and their health, or with their weight. Other people, it shows up with their money. A lot of times it's not our shadow that's actually acting up. but it's somebody else's shadow, right? Or we're having this financial meltdown, which is part of our collective shadow, the spending money, the greed, the not thinking, the giving responsibility to other people and not taking care of ourselves. So there's so many ways for the shadow to appear.
Is there ways for us to get rid of the shadow, to shine something bright onto the shadow so it doesn't interfere with us?
Well, you just said it, and that is really the key. How do we shine something bright? How do we put the light on it? And I love that metaphor of thinking, you're in a dark room, it's completely black, and you walk in with a flashlight, it's no longer dark. And so when we start to understand our humanity and start to understand that there's gold to be mined in the darkness, that there's lessons to be learned, there's wisdom to be extracted, so that we can develop ourselves into healthier, more productive human
Debbie,
beings.
hold on to that thought. You and I have to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. Debbie Ford is my special guest. More about the shadow effect. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. And welcome back to the X-Zone. Debbie Ford is my special guest this hour. Her website is www.debbieford.com. And Debbie is a New York Times best-selling author. She was inspired by the famed psychiatrist Carl Jung and has been a pioneering force in incorporating the study and integration of the shadow into modern emotional and spiritual practices. She is the author of many best-selling books, including The Dark Side of the Light, Chasers, The Secrets of the Shadow, Spiritual Divorce, and Why Good People Do Bad Things. She has appeared on numerous television shows, including a number of times on Oprah, Larry King Live, Good Morning America, and other major media programs around the world. Her acclaimed workshop, The Shadow Process, has set new standards in the field of transformation, healing hearts, mending families, and supporting others in birthing new futures. Once again, her website is www.debbieford.com. Debbie, before we went to the commercial break, we were talking about putting light onto the shadow to get rid of the shadow. How do we do this?
Well, we do it by Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist, as you mentioned, said we must find the gold in the dark. Mm-hmm. And so how do we find the gold in the darkness? We start to understand ourselves as something other than just this good person. One of the biggest issues I see today in psychological wellness is that people think that they're going to become this good person. One day they'll be nice enough, sweet enough, smart enough, successful enough to be self-accepting. Because when we were young, we were told, don't be angry, don't be mean, don't be selfish, don't be greedy. And the message that gets internalized is this message meaning don't be. It's not okay to be who I am. Mm-hmm. So when we start to look for, what is the gift here? What is the light? Well, for most of us, we will find that the thing that we like the best about ourselves, the quality or the behavior, was birthed out of some shadow. So for example, somebody could love their kind and generous heart. Well, a lot of times when they look, they'll find out they had a mean parent, and they decided, I don't like that mean part of me. Mm-hmm. Somebody called them mean. They hid that away, and they started wrapping themselves up in this new persona, which is sweet and kind. The problem is as they get older and they want to say no to something, or they don't want to be a people pleaser, all of a sudden they find themselves strangled because the only thing they can do is be what they believe is good or nice. So a lot of people that get into places of power, they got there because they felt so powerless. They felt helpless or inadequate. So they work and work and work. We don't understand that we're not driven by what we do want to be. We're driven by what we don't want to be, and that is the power of the shadow.
So I'm trying to understand the shadow. Is the shadow the negativity that each and every one of us has? Would this be classified as the darker side of our personal beings?
Yes, the part of us that we try to hide, the part of us that we lie about, the person that we're saying, I'm not that, that's our shadow. You know, the part of our mother and our father where we said, I'm not going to grow up and be like them, that would be our shadow. Anything that we reject out of shame or fear. And the shadow effect is when that part of us that we've keeping hidden, right, pops up and hits us in the face and does some act of self-sabotage, and we're like, oh my God, how did I do that, or what was I thinking? And, you know, we see it in the media all the time.
Give me some
right? Every day you can look and say, what was he thinking? What was she thinking? Well, they weren't thinking.
They may not have been thinking at the time, but if these are rational people and something happens, let's go to Fort Hood, going back to last week, when this U.S. Army major took out 13 soldiers and wounded 31. So 31 people. How would this happen?
Yeah, and
you know, how would the shadow affect? Yeah.
And what did people say about this man? I mean, in the interviews, the ones I've read at least, you know, say that he was really a kind man, really loving. Wasn't he? He was trained psychologically, right? But this part of him, we could say, the shadow aspect that was probably full of anger and rage and powerlessness, right, all of a sudden popped up and then destroyed, you know, so many lives. That's what the shadow does when it's stuffed down. Now, if he had dealt with those impulses, the impulses to destroy, his own internal rage, right? Rage kills. That's what rage does. So if he had dealt with that rage, then we might have saved all these people from dying. Right, we could look at somebody like in your business, right, who makes a racial slur on, you know, all of a sudden something comes out of your mouth or you do something impulsively, right? You're not thinking, oh, I'm going to go and destroy all these lives most of the time. Most of our acts of self-sabotage were like, you know, people get in a relationship right outside their marriage. They weren't like thinking, what is the pain this is going to cause my partner? Do I really want to destroy my kid's life? They're not thinking that the first lie is the problem.
But we can't look at Major Nidal Hassan and say, well, this was something that he did at the spur of the moment, when the FBI and other law enforcement agencies are now looking into his past. And, you know, before he killed 13 people, wounded 31, he yelled out, Allah is great. He had praised Muslim suicide bombers on the internet. He refused in the name of Islam to be photographed with female colleagues, listed his nationality as Palestinian, dressed as a fundamentalist Muslim when not in uniform, and attended the same mosque as the 9/11 terrorists. Now, how can we say that this is a person who fits into a shadow when obviously this guy had severe problems?
Yes, he had severe problems, but we could also look at, let's just look at it both sides, because the other side of it, and I shouldn't say that it's always impulsive. We're talking about the little things that we do that are impulsive, right?
Right.
We could also look at the other side of, the shadow of why didn't we see all these things before he got to this
that's a great
place,
point.
Right? Looking back, we can see it. So, we live in this state. It's part of the human functioning system. Our ego has this mechanism called denial, where we can deny what's going on, where we don't take into account what's seeing. See, I don't know all the details of this man, because when we're talking about the shadow effect, we're not really talking about people who are pathological, right? This man could have been pathological. I don't know his history. But we're talking about ourselves at some point, we start to reject who we are. We start to put down who we are. We start to hide from our very nature to develop into a whole human being. And when we have separated, I would say, you think about, what happens when you tell a 3-year-old not to jump on the bed? What do? They jump on the bed. And so most people have 30 parts of themselves, that are, jumping around inside. And that's why everybody's got the jitters. That's why people can't be still. You can't just put somebody out on the grass and say, sit there for 2 hours. But if we were healthy, we would be able to do that. Just sit there. Feel good inside, like who we are.
Is it possible that the shadow is replacing the devil that made me do it?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's really what they were talking about. The devil made me do it.
But but if that is the case, is it possible that we use the shadow as our scapegoat?
Well, I think that most people do use the shadow as some kind of, like I couldn't help myself, but that's part of bringing the light to it,
secretive,
right?
It can be dangerous.
That dark side.
Oh, they just wanted to play that little clip again, but no, thank you, not right now, guys. Later on.
Yeah. But part of the whole process of shining the light on are all of us, that we're human beings, and human beings do have dark tendencies. We have all tendencies, and we could take the nicest, most beautiful woman, and lock her up and beat her for 10 days and turn her into an angry witch. We can do that, right? Because those qualities exist within us, and depending on our histories, depending on how we were treated, depending on our nature that we come in with, right? We go to a playground, we see these little kids. Some of them are like the little prey, and some of them are the predators. We have fundamental natures, and in my work, it's to how do I make peace with the impulses that are inside of me, so I don't have to destroy my life, or I don't have to destroy the lives of other people. So most people don't act out in huge ways. They act out in enough ways to spend, too much money so that they're in debt constantly, or not take care of their health, or do something in their relationship, or, work to have a loving relationship with their kid and then shame them. This is how the shadow effect shows up in most of our lives.
When you and I come back from this news break we have to take, let's talk about how we can turn things around and eradicate the shadow effect from all our lives. Exonation, Debbie Ford is my special guest. Her website is www.theshadoweffect.com. That's www.theshadoweffect.com. And Debbie and I will be back on the other side of the news as the X Zone continues right here on the Talkstar Radio Network from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. November 15th, we're going to be shifting gears here in the X Zone. As of November the 15th, the X Zone will be the anchor show for the new network, Voice of Reality Radio, which is also owned by Relmar McConnell Media Company here, and our satellite uplink center is going to be here in Hamilton. We will be working with the people at the Talkstar Radio Network, but they will only be a distributor or a place where you can hear the X Zone, and it's been a great pleasure working with Talkstar over the past 6 years, but the X Zone is growing, so we've decided to take care of our own destiny and leave the shadow behind, so to speak. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. 1-877-528-8255 is toll-free. Email xzone@talkstarradio.com. On MSN Messenger, Talkstar at Hotmail, and our websites, xzoneradio.com and xzonetv.com. Don't go away.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and yes, we're coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to give us a call, 1-877-528-8255. That is toll-free throughout the U.S., Canada, Alaska, and Hawaii. Email xzone@talkstarradio.com. On MSN Messenger, talkstarradio@hotmail.com. And our websites, www.xzoneradio.com and xzonetv.com. You know, there's a lot of things happening in the news these days. A married governor is caught with a mistress in Latin America. A teen idol and role model pleads guilty to beating his girlfriend. Corporate executives use government bailout money to fund luxurious vacations. A conservative radio host checks into rehab for prescription drug abuse. A film director who produces Christian films shows anti-Semitic comments in a drunken rage. These are just a few of the examples of what New York Times best-selling author Debbie Ford calls the shadow effect. This emotionally gripping, visually stunning documentary exposes the opposing forces of both light and dark that compete for the attention within every human being and presents the hidden power of the shadow alongside some of today's most provocative thinkers and beloved teachers, including Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, Mark Victor Hansen, Dr. David Simon, James Von Prague, and many others. Her website is www.debbieford.com, or you can visit theshadoweffect.com as well. Debbie, great having you with us. So we know what the shadow effect is. We see how it plays out in the lives of people. It's been with us since, I would imagine, the dawning of humanity so many years ago. The year 2009, Debbie, how do we get rid of this shadow effect?
Well, if we think of it as we're going to bring the light to it, we actually never get rid of it. We just bring it into the light. One of the ways that I describe it in the DVD is that I always call it the beach ball effect. So if we imagine that we take these parts of ourselves that we're calling the shadow, whether it's your inauthentic self or your lazy self or your gluttonous self, and you are holding each part of you beneath the water, you know, like you have a beach ball underwater. That at some point, right, when you get distracted, what happens with the beach ball?
It goes right
pops up and hits you in the face, right? We've all been hit in the face by that beach ball.
Yes, we
and
have.
That's what's happening with the parts of ourselves. So in the shadow effect, we would invite these parts to the surface. So the number one step is we have to acknowledge that we all have them and that they're part of our humanity. That they're not actually these dark, horrible parts. Like a little dose of laziness might save you from a heart attack, right? We never know why we have a quality. If you're, you know, a Jew in Nazi Germany, you want to be able to lie. We keep making normal human qualities wrong because really we wouldn't know darkness if we didn't know light. We wouldn't know light if we didn't know darkness. The humans know by contrast. We wouldn't know love if we didn't know mean or fear or hate. So when we understand that we have all these human qualities, we shine the light. We start with the light of awareness by saying, okay, I'm human. I have these impulses. I have the impulse to do something, get revenge, let's say. You know, you can take, your bat out and start hammering the part of you that wants a revenge, or you could actually go inside and see what that part of you could offer you, what it wants you to learn, what you could do to take care of yourself. I mean, I believe, as most spiritual teachers would believe, that we're here to learn to love. And we're not just here to learn to love the good parts of ourselves, but we're here to learn to love the whole human. So as we're willing to just take a moment, that's all it takes, and say, oh, why would I have this part? Why would I need a dose of selfishness, right? People hate their selfish self, but although we can see that we live in a world that's mostly selfish. So maybe if we didn't try to keep suppressing that, and we saw what that part of us actually needs so that it could be selfless as well, because if we're everything, then we have a polar opposite of every quality. And that in and of itself, Rob, starts to alter the way people feel about themselves. When we feel good about ourselves, we don't have to hide who we are. I tell people come to me all the time and they say, I don't want to be phony.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, thank God you're phony. And they're horrified. Why would I want to be phony? I'm like, can you imagine if you just said the truth to everybody that walked in front of you, whether, they smell or you can't stand, they look like your mother that you hate, whatever the reason. We are birthed with a lot of these different kinds of qualities. People don't want to be needy. So in the resistance, because what you resist persists, you resist the needy part of you,
Mm-hmm.
then you have to pretend like you're completely independent. You can't get the support you need. So it's about lightening up and learning what it is to be a human being.
So are you saying that the shadow is a very...
Am I helping at all?
I have to ask you, so are you saying that the shadow is a very important part of us that we have to acknowledge in order to become good humans?
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm saying we've all got one. We can try. We've been trying for ages to get rid of it, right? To
Mm-hmm.
hide it. Some people, you're a sinner, you're this,
Yeah.
you're bad. But everybody's got these parts of themselves that they wish they didn't have. And it isn't working to just try to cover them up because they are the beach ball popping up and hitting us in the face. So what would happen? What happens when we bring love or light to anything? It transforms.
But how does this stop the beach ball from hitting us smack in the face when we're not paying attention?
That's a good question. But if we think about it, the only reason why the beach ball is underwater is because we're so ashamed or so fearful of that part.
All right, so we're
So
suppressing
otherwise,
it.
beach balls would be
Mm-hmm.
floating on top, and we'd understand, okay, I have this part of me that's mean. I also have a very kind part, because you have every part. So whatever the opposite of that is, and when might I need that mean part? An example of that is I had a woman who came to me as a very beloved woman in Hollywood. And she has these 3 sons, and one of her sons is constantly getting in trouble, and she keeps bailing him out of court and rehab and buying him houses, and he's ripping off her friends. And when we're working together to look at what the shadow is, the shadow for her is her mean self. Mean is unacceptable to her. Everybody in Hollywood thinks she's one of the angel of Hollywood. But she needed that mean part of her to cut off her son. And because she couldn't access that part of her because it was so horrible,
Mm-hmm.
her son actually wound up dying.
Oh, heavens.
And years later, she came and she said, if I could have just been able to be mean. So we don't know, it's only the righteousness of this whole kind of, to be a human being is, do you ever have dark thoughts?
Sure.
I have them
Yeah, sure.
quite frequently. Maybe that's why I have to write about the shadow. Somebody does something, they cut you off the road, you think that idiot, somebody steals from somebody else, you see Madoff, you're like, somebody should, lock this guy up and do horrible things to him. This is human.
So we're born with the shadow. Do we die with the shadow?
Unless we bring it into the light, and then it doesn't have to be a shadow anymore, right? It can just be part of our light. It's part of our humanity. If we can be in respect, I think respect that there is a reason for every quality, and we may not know when. A healthy dose of greed, right, would maybe have you put away money or ask for a lot of people can't ask for the salaries they want or the raises that they want because they feel like they would be greedy. Well, a healthy dose of greed is fine, but when greed is suppressed like it is, it then pops up. Look at what's happened to us, right? The greed of the corporate world has taken half the people down, good people. So people don't learn to be, people want to be trusting, right? Good people are trusting. Well, a good dose of being untrusting would have us trust maybe our own impulses, or when somebody tells us to invest in something or lend us money and we think, oh, that doesn't feel right. But the good person does it anyway. And so that's why it's so important to bring it into the light, to be humble enough to say, I'm a human being. What is a human being made of? If we watch a child, we find out what the human being is made of. 1 minute they're screaming, right? They're screaming, they're going crazy. The next minute their sound asleep is peaceful, right? You can just It's the most delicious feeling to watch that. The next minute, what are they doing? They're crying.
Mm-hmm.
So they're sad, and the next minute they're giggling and they're laughing and they're joyous. This is the range of human emotion. But as we grow up, we're told, don't be that, don't be that. People don't like angry people. Even when you brag and you say, look at me, you come home from school, you got a good grade, or you did something well. Most people had parents who said, don't be too full of yourself, don't be too greedy. So then the light parts of us that could help us in life actually get locked in the shadow.
What are some of the changes that people have talked to you about that you've had in their lives because they've learned through you about the shadow effect?
Dramatic. I'll tell you an example of just something that happened this week.
Okay.
A man, his shadow was, he was a womanizer.
Mm-hmm.
And this was always going on, right? Always going on, and he couldn't. He was miserable in his relationship. He's already been divorced twice, blah, 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 blah. So we deal with the shadow to bring it to the light, to him to really see the pain of what it has caused him over his lifetime, right? Usually we're trying to suppress it. Instead, we bring it into the light. We talk about it. So I just say, just for a week, just give that part of you what it needs. What is that part of you that's always looking for attention? That's what he was looking for in other women. Okay, so we're gonna give that part of you attention. So all of a sudden, he calls me. He goes to visit his daughter, which means everything in the world to him, who's never talked to his new girlfriend. But because he's not acting out, all of a sudden the daughter wants to meet the new girlfriend. And he's like, everything is so peaceful. Why is everything so peaceful? Well, we're not trying to hide this big elephant, beneath the surface. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with it. So, I could give you 10,000 examples of once we deal with our own shadows, our parents actually show up differently. Because ultimately, it's an act of forgiveness. It's an act of forgiveness. We have to forgive ourselves for being human, for being flawed, for being imperfect. And that when we start to forgive ourselves, we're kinder to ourselves, therefore kinder to the people in our lives.
So when we recognize our shadow and learn how to get it to work with us instead of against us, does this have the same ripple effect that other self-realization does in a person's life that affects the rest of the people who they come in contact with?
Yes, and I love the way you just said that. That was just perfect. It is that once we alter it inside of ourselves, right? Because the outer world really is a reflection of our inner world. So if I shift, everybody in my world will have a shift with me. And that's the power. That's why collectively I think it's imperative. One of the shadows that I see is the shadow of being irresponsible, financially irresponsible, or we're not responsible for taking good care of ourselves. And I'm as guilty as anybody. And that if, we healed that shadow within ourselves, we would teach our children to become more responsible, right? They would teach their children. We would start to collectively be more responsible for all that's going on in the world. And so it has this ripple effect that you see it everywhere. Even things like there's so many people who feel stupid or dumb. I always tell people that stupid gave me my career because when I went back to school, I was studying to be a psychologist. Mm-hmm. And I would just go to school and think, I'm just too stupid to get all this information. I just would read one page 10 times. And that led me to explore different kinds of consciousness studies and different kinds of methods that ultimately birthed my last 7 books. So I give my credit to my stupid self for birthing my whole career. Now, I could hate that part of me, right? Be embarrassed of it, ashamed of it. Or I can love it and see, where's it trying to guide me? And that's what I see when people do shadow work and do. The shadow effect also has an interactive copy where people can actually, after they watch the movie, go through, find their own shadows, make peace with those shadows, and start to look for what they can adjust in their life.
Debbie, stand by. Debbie Ford is our special guest. 2 websites, www.debbieford.com. and www.theshadoweffect.com. great guest, great books, super DVD. Debbie and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as the X Zone continues right here from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. www.theshadoweffect.com and www.debbieford.com. Two important web addresses, X Zone Nation. Please check them both out. And first of all, Debbie, I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight here on the X Zone. Congratulations on yet another bestseller, another great way to help people. But I'd like to ask you this, Debbie. From what age to what age would a person be able to have their shadow effect treated? For example, can we use your technique with our children, our teenagers, our adults, and our seniors?
Absolutely. And I have a 15-year-old that, I think is part of that new generation where they're not so judgmental. I think they're open more to their humanity. So that I remember when my son came home from school one day and he said, Stephen called me annoying, and he was all upset and flustered because he had felt like he was teased because he was called annoying. And I'm like, well, I'm really annoying. Aren't we all annoying? And instead of saying, well, you're not annoying, because, we're all a little bit annoying, I took the charge off of it. And so then I said, well, where are you annoying? And I said, and I bet you Stephen annoys you too. So I think that this is stuff we have to get in the educational system, because these words become bombs that can have us people, these kids commit suicide because they're being teased.
Yeah.
And part of that is that the shame is the most painful feeling. And we have shame because we think, well, I'm annoying, but you're not. But when we're standing in this microcosm, that we're all everything and that we all have these qualities, then we can start to heal. And even I had an 80-year-old woman come to my shadow process last year, Rob. It was amazing. And, when she got done, she said, I'm going to forgive my brother. I haven't talked to him in 50-something years.
Oh, wow.
And she started a new life. And so this is the possibility, I think, for all of us we're only hold on to grudges, and we're only tough on ourselves because we feel ashamed. We feel like we've been wrong. And how do we learn to love ourselves, or bring, just like that song you just played, like just being showered in the light so that we can forgive and open our hearts?
I think forgiveness is the hardest thing for people to do, and why it is, I have no idea. Because in order to forgive yourself, you have to forgive others first.
Exactly, and that it's a process of the heart.
Exactly.
And I think that most people are trying to forgive in their heads, and the whole back end of the shadow effect is about forgiveness and these great stories. We have a Holocaust survivor. You know what she says in the movie?
No.
She says, Debbie, she said this to me before the movie. She says, I would never be angry at Hitler. I'm not going to let Hitler live in my space 1 second. And that's it. When we're angry, those people own a piece of us. They have power over us. They live inside our bodies every day.
Debbie, you and I have to
say
say so long for now. We've run out of time, but I would love to have you back on in the future so we can we can continue this conversation about the shadow. But until then, thank you very much for joining us. I love the work that you do.
Thank you so much.
You're touching so many hearts, and looking forward to having you back. Debbie Ford, www.debbieford.com and theshadoweffect.com. talkstar.com. When I come back from this news break at the top of the hour, Dr. Georgina Kennan joins me from the Ontario Hypnosis Centre as the X Zone continues live and around the world right here on Talkstar.